and welcome to Season 2 of Harpist in the Wild, a Baroque feast. In this season, I'll be playing music by three of the most famous composers from the Baroque period, Bach, Handel, and Vivaldi, and weaving some stories about these composers and their music. Come with me. That was the start of Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor, one of the most iconic and recognizable openings in all of classical music. But that hasn't always been the case. Now we think of Bach as a towering figure among classical composers, but in his own time, he was not that famous, and what fame he had was more for his skill as an organist than for a composer. It was actually the composer Felix Mendelssohn who helped kickstart Bach's rise to fame with Bach revival concerts starting in 1829. And it was Bach's choral music that really led the way. So some of the pieces that we most associate with Bach now didn't become particularly well known until into the early 1900s, and certainly the Toccata and Fugue is one of those. But did Bach actually write it? There exists no original manuscript in Bach's own hand of the Toccata and Fugue. What we have instead is a manuscript, a score, written a little bit later by an organist a generation older than Bach, and attributing the composition to Bach. So some Bach historians have raised doubts as to who actually wrote the piece. And I know for me, I'm not a music historian, I'm not a Bach scholar, but I've played a lot of Bach in my life, and I remember not knowing anything about the history of the piece, but reading through the piano transcription as I was first looking at potentially adapting it for harp a number of years ago, and thinking that it just didn't really sound like I expected Bach to sound, various parts of it. In particular, the fugue didn't really seem to have enough development that I was expecting, and enough modulation. So then it was fascinating to read something about the history and find out that there are these doubts. Still, despite these doubts, no one has yet to come up with a better option than Bach as the composer, and he's still generally credited. And after all, the music exists on its own. It doesn't really matter who wrote it. But on the other hand, as humans, we love stories, and certainly the story of who wrote a piece and when and why can influence how we hear it. As to when the Toccata and Fugue was written, nobody knows for sure. But one thought is that if Bach wrote it, perhaps he wrote it early in his career, as early as 1705, when he would have been only 20 years old. That would help explain the relative simplicity of the fugue, and any other oddities might be youthful experimentation. I've chosen to go along with that story of events and place the Toccata first in the series, the earliest of the 6 Baroque pieces that I will play over these 6 episodes of Season 2. The Toccata and Fugue is perhaps the most famous organ piece in the world, but Bach himself would often take pieces he'd written for one instrument and transpose them to another instrument. So I like to think he would approve of hearing us on the harp. Of course, I've released a music video of the entire Toccata and Fugue on pedal harp, but here, from summer 2020, is a take on lever harp of the Toccata.